Welcome to the Art of Succession podcast with Barrett Young. Join us as we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that shape the journey of leadership transitions and business success. No matter where you find yourself along the journey, this is the podcast where you'll find the tools to make it happen.
Man, this internet thing is really cool, and it makes so much sense for people to be able to file court paperwork online instead of having to come stand in line and fill it all out by hand. So we had to do a lot of cleanup and structure building to make the company appealing to an acquirer. And the real money comes from rich relationships with those customers, knowing the nuance of their particularities.
My name is Barrett Young, and this is the Art of Succession podcast. My guest today is Nick Garofalo, a CFP candidate and the founder of Open-Handed Wealth. For the span of 7 years, Nick worked with his dad at Court Solutions, a payment processing company primarily focused on traffic court fines. In 2017, they sold that company to a consolidator, and Nick continued to work in the same role for that company as it continued to acquire before launching his company and changing careers. Nick, welcome to the Art of Succession.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to start off with what's the burning desire, or what brings you to the Art of Succession today? What is it specifically about business succession that you want to share with my audience?
There's a reason that the business can be referred to as the baby of the owner. When you cradle something from its infancy all the way to its divestiture, or all the way to its success, and you ride off into the sunset and head down to your kids, there is an unbelievable amount of your soul that's like poured into this company. It's an incredibly transitional, pivotal time in life when you are leaving it and going on to a new chapter. I love that exact space. It's where I personally walked. It's where I watched my dad walk, and it's where I'll probably walk someday soon eventually as a business owner myself.
Great. Awesome. So let's get into that story. Your dad started the company in 2000 and you came along in 2010. Fill in the context a little bit. What do you mean by a payment processor?
Well, so I'll even fill in some context there. So he started one company in 2000. He was bought out from that company in, I think, 2007, started this one in 2008. And so then I came to work for him in 2010. So this is the second time that he was trying to start a very similar business. And I think that initial 7 years probably helped immensely, I'm sure, to launch the business that he, eventually I worked for and that he sold. Yeah, payment processor. It was kind of a newish term, I guess, back in 2010. But, if you got a traffic ticket, there were basically no modern ways to pay it where we were trying to serve. And so, we built a product, and my dad built a website product where you could go look up your traffic ticket, process a payment for it, and the court would get the money in, a day or two. And that was pretty disruptive technology to the money order or certified check that was required up to that point for paying any sort of government fine like that to a pretty rural part of the country. Gotcha.
Okay. How did your dad come about that? I didn't realize he had started another company there, but was he a tech guy? Was he a web developer? What brought him to that?
No, not even close.
Okay.
Not even
problem solver. He was an entrepreneur. He sees a problem solver.
Man, he was such a problem solver, which really gives me great courage, because you don't have to be a web developer to start a tech company. Who knew, right? Even in 2010, somebody approached him in like the late 90s with this idea that, like, man, this internet thing is really cool, and it makes so much sense for people to be able to file court paperwork online instead of having to come stand in line, and fill it all out by hand. But even then it was like, well, you have to have stuff notarized inside. You still have to do that. So they developed this kind of, online paperwork processing management platform. But it wasn't just filing paperwork. That, kind of branched into other court related services, right? And payments are a huge one. And so my dad spun off from there in the late 2010s, 08, 09, and started Court Solutions to do traffic ticket payments, and really just zoomed in on that slice. And so it's still, you have a problem of like, well, if Nick speeds through town, gets a ticket, and then he wants to go pay it, how does he look it up So we had to have a data connection with the court, case software manager, uh, and then be able to present that on a website where you could go and find yourself without, in theory, just mining it for all of the traffic tickets in our database. So, that was still kind of early stage of that technology, trying to, set that up in a way where it was secure enough, but also still user friendly.
Gotcha. Okay. So then I guess his first business, it sounds like he had a partner then that was the tech side of it, or had that vision, and he came along.
He had a partner that was the legal side.
Gotcha.
And then they kind of outsourced the tech side, building a website and, setting up the connections and integrations and all that. My dad's a salesman. He's a phenomenal relational, go-getter, problem solver kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So every business needs that. He was that, the integrator, following the EOS, traction kind of framework. So he was the visionary. He needed the integrator. And so they hired this out, and it was a beautiful thing.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, very cutting edge, starting this company, doing this kind of actual work on the internet in 2000. I'm thinking back to 2000, 97, 98. eBay is the biggest marketplace on the internet. PayPal just starts to facilitate that. And here your dad and his partner come along, and they're like, well, we're going to allow you to pay traffic courts and look up actual court cases and look up the fines associated with them on the internet. So kudos to your dad. Definitely saw the vision there of what was possible. What kind of, you came along 10 years later. What kind of problems did they have to solve for? What kind of things did they get into that they didn't realize going into it, that they came up with solutions for to make this successful?
I think probably one of the biggest hurdles right out of the gate is building trust. Because if you just pick up the phone and call a government office, you're like, hey, I have a way for people to pay you. Imagine doing that now, right? Much less 15 years ago. Building trust with the public sector is very difficult. It's a very, very long sales cycle. I also, there were some other issues of just growth. Growth is very, very slow and stubborn because you have to sign on individual accounts, and the real money comes from rich relationships with those customers, knowing the nuance of their particularities.
Every county is going to have different things that they need, and
yes,
got to be customized to their solution.
Well, I'll give you a fun example here, and this is where I love this idea of become an expert on your customers' problems and be really good at solving them. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it tax prep. You can call it financial planning. You can call it, payment processing. But if you can be really, really good at solving a pain point they have, they'll love you forever. And why wouldn't they? So we had a problem, a couple of problems where you get a ticket, you want to pay it immediately, and you pick up the phone because you see a phone number on the back of the ticket. So you pick up your cell phone, right? Luckily it was past car phones, but you pick up your phone, you call in, and it's like, hey, can I pay this? Like, okay, yeah, sure. When did you get it? Well, 7 minutes ago. Okay. It's not going to be available for payment until maybe a week or two, because it just takes that long when you're dealing with carbon copied, tickets. Nowadays, the e-ticketing systems are literally instant. But that's modern technology even now that isn't fully integrated across the country, right? So we built a matching system where we could just take your information and queue it up and save that. And then as we were getting in new data, it would say here's Barrett's last name, date of birth, and his citation number, and it matches and sends you an email. It's like, hey, we think we found your ticket. You can click here to pay it. And that was a way of following up with you, keeping current with you, reminding you to pay your ticket, because let's be honest, life happens and we forget. And then also capturing that revenue for the court. So we saw some really, really good results from that system. And another one was again, like you said, these different jurisdictions had different particularities of they do it this way, they do it that way. If you get a ticket for no driver's license, but you do have a license, it's just sitting in your wallet, you forgot at home. Typically you can get that reduced to a $20 admin fee and you're done. But you have to get a copy of it to the court, which back then it was like faxing. you know? And so we developed a system where they could like, snap a picture with their phone, email it to us. We would take the record and then e-fax it to the court. We would then, we could actually, there were some customers or some clients that even let us do the verification for the clerk to say like, yes, this matches the person's name, date of birth, our records that we're looking at from your database, Mr. Courthouse. We'll match it for you, reduce it, process the payment on the phone right then, send you all that you need to keep your records. So it was like we really integrated ourselves deeply with our customers to solve their problems, to make their lives easier, and they loved us for it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you really were serving two types of customers. You had the customer you were actually collecting revenue from, which was the court system. But the user of your platform was not the court system. They just want to get paid. They don't want to get phone calls and they don't want to get phone calls from people that are frustrated. You want to make sure that the user that's actually using it, not somebody coming in on a monthly basis or anything like that, but just a one-time thing, has a good enough experience that they don't just say, I'm just going to write a check. This is stupid. So how were you getting feedback on that platform at the time? Because your direct customer is the court. They don't know. They don't use it. How are you getting direct feedback from the secondary customer back then?
That's a great question. I actually don't know if I have a great answer for that, but I think what you just did is you identified the first real problem, which is the customer I have to sell isn't the customer who's going to pay me anything. And I have to, it's kind of like in pharmaceuticals, how like a pharma rep has to like get the doctor to prescribe the medicine and then get the person to go and fill the prescription. So we had to kind of navigate that sales process. What we found is that if we could serve the court clerk well, and if we could really make his or her life easier, reduce phone calls, integrate well, learn their systems. And we were really nice. We had really nice people working with us. We were just kind, and when you treat someone with kindness and who usually gets griped at on the phone all day and cussed at and screamed at, and, like they pick up the phone and call the clerk and rip him a new one because the officer, well, he pulled me up. And it's like, you hear the worst stories. So if we were just nice and if we could make their life easier and take those phone calls off of them, they would push people to us. They would change their voicemail and be like, hey, if you're calling to pay a ticket, call them. They would put our number and website on this ticket, so when you're holding it, you can see our, so like it was, and then we had to make the user experience very clean, very distraction free, very simple, so when you go, it's kind of like if you went to Google in like the, early 2000s, you're like, what is this? It's just like a white page with a box. What do I do with this?
So easy. All I have to do is search.
Ask Jeeves was where it was at. You go and it's like, hey, I'm Jeeves. What do you want to learn about? Here's all your filters. And like, Jeeves did a good job of explaining what you're supposed to do with it. Google was just like, kind of like Apple is now, where it's just like, yeah, we made a product and you have to figure it out, But we had to make a product that was so simple that you could do it with no questions. And making that as frictionless as possible helped a lot.
Hey there. We're coming up on the end of season 2 of The Art of Succession, and July brings our 1-year anniversary of the show as well. I hope that you've enjoyed the changes that I implemented in season 2. I've gotten some really good data from the algorithm just to see how people have been responding to that. For season 3, I've got some other ideas, but I really want to connect with you as a listener. So down in the description below, you'll find a link to my calendar. I've got space for 5 listeners who are available to book a 5 to 10 minute Zoom call with me. I really just want to talk with you, meet you, and find out what brings you to the Art of Succession, when you listen to the show, and what you enjoy about it as I look to season 3 and beyond of the show. If you don't have the time to book that, I understand. I also have a Google form down there that you can fill out and just leave your feedback for the show as well. I want to thank you for being with me on this journey so far. I'm looking forward to the season 3 launch and the new guests that I'm going to be bringing to you. And let's get back to that episode. Before the show, you talked about your brother also joined the company. So you joined in 2010. Did your brother join at the same time? What brought you guys to Dad's company at that time? What was the role and what was what were you solving for the company?
Yeah, for me, I think I came in because my dad was willing to pay me more than Publix to buy groceries. And I would rather work for my dad than work back in groceries through high school. And,
Okay, so 2010, it was the part-time job kind of thing.
It was a part-time job for me, and it became full-time. I wanted to be involved in the family business. That was cool to me. It wasn't, I never really grew up aspiring to work in an office and sit at a desk, behind a computer. I don't know many people that really dream of that, but it was neat, and it was fun to be involved in business. And I took an interest in it when I was, especially getting into college. I majored in finance, so I eventually took on the role of the financial manager for the company, making sure that our reports were tidy, that the accountant and tax preparer had what they needed, that their questions were answered, that there was a strategy, and just somebody keeping a finger on the pulse, so to speak, of the numbers of the business, besides just this classic entrepreneur like bank balance accounting, like I have money in the bank, I'm good. My brother came on almost the same time, actually, as the operations director. So my brother's brilliant. He's an incredibly talented software architect and engineer, completely self-taught. He majored in political science. He's absolutely brilliant. Probably reads a book a day. He's just one of those guys. So when he came in, he started not even with a whole lot of business experience, but just kind of an understanding of systems and processes and how things should be built. And he was so good at taking my dad's harebrained ideas that he would scribble out on a whiteboard and turning it into an actual, okay, I think I see what you're trying to do, and it's going to look like this. And to get here, we need to back way up here and start slowly and building toward this, which was such an important, talking about an integrated role. Like, that was such an important piece for my dad to have that person who could help, bring that clarity and that structure.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like this is an older brother who was already ready to start his adult professional life, and you guys brought the integrator in-house at this point, whereas before it would have been contractors. And in this company now that your dad spun off in 2007, your brother came in as the integrator to your dad's visionary.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. He's an older brother. Yeah. So he's 4 years older than me, and, I'm lucky to have gotten to work with him.
Awesome. So what was the vision at that time in 2010 for the company? I know your dad's just thrilled to have his two boys working with them, and you're kind of new, not sure what you want to do, but what was the vision for the company for that almost 10 years that you guys were working in there?
Barrett, I don't know if there was much of a vision.
Okay.
And that's kind of what's funny is, like, I think my dad's vision was make money, provide for the family, build a business.
Okay. So
is that not a good enough vision? That was kind of his.
Yeah, no, but his visionary days that caused him to launch an internet company in 2000 had kind of just settled a little bit, maybe, or you saw the end in sight?
I'd say that. Maybe I discounted that question too much. When you say a vision, let me put it this way. I guess the vision was, we want to be the payment processor for traffic courts. And, that was kind of just driving, I guess it was broad. Like, it was probably about that broad. When I say vision now, I think differently. Having read the books that we have in the last 15 years, and all the content and podcasts around vision and mission and values and stuff like that, I think of Chick-fil-A, I think of Apple, I think of these big companies that are vision driven.
Yeah, we
weren't one of those. We just were like, hey,
world changing kind of.
Yeah, mission. We just built my dad kind of built a business, and it was let's get this off the ground. Let's take care of customers, and let's make that court clerk's life easier by taking those angry phone callers away and processing payments.
Yeah. A much more localized vision, but still a vision for a small business. What was the size of the company when you and your brother joined? How many people were on the team?
Single digits. Yeah, low single digits. When we finally sold, when he sold it in 2017, I think we're up to like 14 or 15 employees.
So still very much a small family style feel business.
Yeah.
And customer wise, I mean, how many payments, like talk to me about growth during that led up to the acquisition. Just what was the attractive value proposition here for an acquirer?
Yeah. Integrated payments. What I mean by that is payments that are relationship based, very sticky. Like I said, we deeply integrated with our customers. We knew their problems well. We solved them, and we had good, strong cash flows for it. We had double-digit growth several years in a row, and as long as we continue to, very rarely do we lose a customer. And the margins were great. I mean, we would charge a percent processing fee, which would cover our integration and development time and costs and call center, and there was still enough meat left on the bone for an owner to find it appealing.
Yeah, I was going to say the sales cycle might be longer when you're dealing with those kind of entities, but you bring on a court in 2001, it's probably still using the same system unless you don't screw something up. It's like, no, we made our innovative decision and we're going to stick with it for the next 30 years.
Just about. Now, I'll say it's very hard to actually vet at least it was. It's probably much easier now with the amount of data out there. But man, trying to vet the potential revenue of a court was extremely difficult. Some of our highest revenue courts were these tiny little towns that you've never heard of that are, basically speed. I mean, some of them, but they had a little slice of the freeway, and then other clients we thought would be really significant never bought in. And so we got a tiny percent of their gross traffic ticket volume. And as a result, because they didn't really see the vision, right? It wasn't that appealing to them.
They weren't putting your number on the tickets. They weren't saying all payments must go through here. They're like, if you want to come in and pay in person, we'll still take that check, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we had clients that would take payments over the phone at their office on their own credit card processor, and it's like, well, why'd you
after using your system to look it up? After using your system to look it up on the web, I'm going to call and process it there.
Yeah. Well, because the court wouldn't charge you a service fee like we would, and so sometimes the court clerk would be like, "Well, I don't like that they're having to pay an extra $15 or whatever." It's like, well, that's fair, but you could have been doing something else instead of taking that phone call.
We'll get into the acquisition here in a minute. Talk about your dad just approaching retirement, starting to look at his two boys working in the company, your older brother running the company, very much so in the day-to-day. Share with me just a little bit of the conversations that were happening before 2017.
Yeah. So, at one point my dad did approach my brother and I and kind of just threw out, like, if we wanted to take over the company, he was open to that conversation. And my brother and I we talked about it a few times and just kind of agreed that it wasn't going to work out for us. My dad needed to be able to just have kind of a clean break and go retire. And to do that, we would either have to just come up with the money to buy him out, or borrow it. And we didn't have it. We didn't want to borrow it. And we didn't really want him on like a 3-5 year sort of payment plan. Being bought out slowly. And the other thing too is we kind of saw there was some upcoming like legislative tension about online payments, and again the sales cycle's so long. Neither my brother or I are really salespeople, so we didn't really want all of that involved. And so my dad started looking for an acquirer probably in 2014, 15 even, but struggled because of a number of reasons. For instance, the whole business was built on handshakes. We didn't actually have contracts. We didn't have like letters of understanding, terms and conditions. We didn't have any of that stuff. 10, 15 years ago. And so it wasn't very attractive to an acquirer to come and be like, look, you have good cash flow, but it could literally disappear tomorrow because there's nothing, it just felt like a big liability, a big risk. So we had to do a lot of cleanup and structure building to make the company appealing to an acquirer. And it was fun. I mean, it really was, getting HR structures and policies and procedures and agreements and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, how did your dad, when he was still in the talks with you guys, how did your dad come to a value for the business? Or was it just like you being a financial guy looking and saying, realistically, Dad, you need this type of a number in order to be able to retire fully from this point? Was there a valuation done, or was it just very much more like, we need to take care of Dad and we can't do that with the cash we have right now?
I don't think it was really either. The typical small business world, right? Where it's like he kind of had a number in mind of what he wanted, and it wasn't really based on valuation or metrics. I think it was just, I don't know if it was just like
a big number in his revenue. Mind, like, this is my dream.
He just had a number in mind, and it was not crazy high, but it was high. And we were like, I mean, Dad, we want to take care of you, absolutely, but like, I don't think we can quite do that. Evaluation would have been interesting. And now as a financial planner, I see, oh man, I mean, the stress, this is part of why I got into the career shift that I got into, because I saw firsthand the stress of an entrepreneur who spent 15 years building 2 businesses and was betting everything on the sale. My dad had very little life savings to this point that I knew of, at least. And, he was not independently wealthy. In fact, he grew up in relative poverty. And, in many ways, like, his story is the American dream. He's the son of immigrants, or grandson, I guess, of immigrants. I think it was my grandfather that came over from Italy as a kid with his parents. I guess my dad was the grandson of immigrants. But like,
first native born.
Yeah, his dad was a barber, who worked until his last day of life. And so for my dad to have this dream of retirement and being able to live out his days with my mom together, enjoying life, was really important to him. But he had poured everything back into the company, or spent it on his family. And, it doesn't take a lot, right? I mean, 10, 15% savings over 30 years will do wonders. Everybody can live on 10% less. But he didn't do that. Nobody was there to help him and coach him to that. And so there was a ton of pressure, a ton of stress on, I've got to sell this company for the number that will afford me the retirement that I've always dreamed of.
I hope that you've enjoyed part 1 of my discussion with Nick Garofalo. We have new episodes twice a month interviewing business owners with their own succession stories. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, our link is down in the description below. We'll pick up with part 2 of our interview linked right here, where we'll talk about how Nick grew in his new corporate environment and the decision that he came to eventually launch again on his own. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, and I want to thank you for watching The Art of Succession.